Okay, looks like I've gone live. So I welcome everybody who would be watching this video. Today is the second episode of the season 2 of Let's Talk series. I try to bring it back to the Tuesdays, but so far I am unable to do so. So I'm sticking to Monday and I'm gonna have a feel for whether this time frame works or not. So if you got any questions and such, just let me know down in the comments or in the chat. Then I'll be happy to answer those questions or anything that you want to say about. So let's roll the intro and get things going. So I actually have no way of verifying whether the sound for that was working or not, but hopefully it is. And I'm gonna verify and double check just in case. Bear with me. Okay, so I think we are good. So let me know if you weren't receiving anything, but it seems that everything's good. So let me just kind of get things started. So today I wanted to talk about the tips and extensions of SketchUp. We've done something similar last time in previous season, and I thought it would be good to just spell out all the tips that I've got as well as some of the extensions that I use day to day. And as a full disclosure, I have done a webinar with Enscape where I've showcased all of these. So if you have a chance, you can certainly have a look at that. And I believe there's recordings that are available on that as well. So you can certainly have a go at that. And also, if you look at the description of the streaming, then there's going to be a link for you to access the slides, or I guess the information board that I have kind of put together. I'll also leave that in the chat so you guys could pick that up later. And it's a Patreon page, but you do not have to sign up. You just will be provided with a public link to slides that I have kind of put together. It's going to have all the names and the stuff that I will be talking about during today. I'll try to cover as much as possible, but within the hour frame that I kind of set out for this video or the streaming session, I don't know how much I'll be able to get through. So I'll get things started, and I want to keep this somewhat casual and fluid. So let's get things going. So first of all, let me switch over to sharing screen, and you should be able to see my camera or the webcam on the down right corner as well. But here is a SketchUp view. So this is sort of a model that I kind of put together, shows a little pavilion that I also kind of designed in my student days and just kind of revamped it to what I would like to show today. And before we go ahead and spell out all the tips and extensions, something that I wanted to mention is that all the extensions are going to be available through Extension Warehouse, which is a typical place for you to download all the extensions. And that's where you will find, I would say, about half of the extension that I'll be mentioning today. And then if you go to the Sketchucation, let me bring up a browser. So this is a Sketchucation, sketchucation.com. And if you go there and register, you should be able to download extension from them as well. Themselves have a plugin store, and plugin store has the plugin store extension. And once you actually install that, you should get these three buttons. Or if you go under the extensions, you should be able to find this dialog that says a drop down menu that says Sketch Occasion. And then Extension Store is going to do the same thing as clicking this red cube over here. And once you click on that, and you're going to use the login that you have signed up with, and you're going to be greeted with this kind of screen. And one of the biggest benefit that I find using this one is going to the settings, and then I should be able to see all the machines that I have downloaded the extensions from. So it kind of remembers all the profiles that I have used on this account. And if I go back to a long time ago where I was using, let's say, a MacBook Air, for example, maybe nothing. Okay, this one here from year 2017, I had about 50 odd extensions installed. So I can go ahead and download all of those if I wish to. But yeah, so it's a good way to keep track of all the extensions that you have used in the past. And you can certainly update all the extensions that you have and also search certain type of extension that you would be looking for. And I'll kind of show that during this streaming session. But I just wanted to let you know there are two different places to look for the extensions. One of the benefit, again, on top of being able to download the profile, under the Sketch Occasion dropdown, you are able to go to My Shortcuts. And if you go to My Shortcuts, this window will be appearing, and it just visually highlights all the shortcuts that you currently have. And it's a very good visual tool to just kind of see everything in front of you. And mind you, I will be sharing a lot of shortcuts because I am kind of big on shortcuts, and also I want you to get in habit of using them. And a lot of them are going to be sort of a custom. I stick to as many standard shortcuts as possible, but I like to make my own shortcuts, and I pretty much have them as my muscle memory as far as using them. So I will go over whichever the customs that I have assigned. However, for you to assign one, you just go down to Window Preferences, and then under the shortcut side, you should be able to find something. So for example, if you want to assign a offset, then I have assigned O. As a default, O would be orbit. However, I have changed it to offset because I prefer to I prefer to use O for offset. I just use the middle mouse button in order to orbit around. So that's what I have assigned. And in order to do so, you just go here, press O, and then press plus button. So that's how you can assign custom shortcuts. Got to and then when you have those shortcuts, then you can basically export them and import them as well. So I usually export all of my shortcuts out so that I can import it on a different machine or a different version of SketchUp. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, just let me know down in the chat. I'll be happy to answer. And if I'm going too fast, just let me know. I'll slow down and try to explain as much as I can. However, the recording should be available later on for you to kind of watch in segments, as well as the slides that I have shared a link of should be available for you to find any information later in the future. Okay, let me cancel that. So extension warehouse, and then you also have extension manager, which is a SketchUp native thing. And this one will basically show you all the extensions that you've got installed on your system. I can't really count all of these, but I have quite a few, as you can see. And you can occasionally see these update button being available as a dark blue. And once you have that, you can click on them to update them. You can also disable them if you don't need specific type of extension, but this is a good way to keep track of things if you need to. So with that out of the way, I want to drop a couple of SketchUp general tips. First thing is I actually like to use some of the, let's see here. As everybody does, I still would like to use 3D Warehouse of SketchUp, and I'm sure a lot of you already have used them before. So 3dwarehouse.sketchup.com, or just search 3D Warehouse on Google and you should be able to find them. And in here, I often just search, or I usually have my own components available. But for you to find this, you can just say white outline, and then you're going to have to click on models because products have a priority of being shown up on your list. So click on models, and then the first thing that's going to pop up is white outlined 2D people. If for whatever reason that doesn't show up for you, then you can just say white outlined people, then that should really pop up. And you can just download that onto your onto your machine, and then basically drag that onto your machine, into your model. You can literally drag and drop. And once you drag and drop, those people will pop up. I like using these people because they are simple and they're not photorealistic type of people who can be quite distracting. They're light to run. And as you rotate, you can see they are face me components. Therefore, it kind of makes sense in the scene, and they are not as distracting as other type of people you may find. And I don't like having a whole bunch of color in the model, so I try to keep them light by having these type of people. And in regards to just placing people, actually do keep in mind that you want to have some grouping or story or some reason for them to be. Obviously, if time's at stake, you're just going to spread them across a field like this, and it just doesn't really make sense. But in this case, I try to have somebody next to the car, perhaps trying to get in the car. Maybe it would have made more sense if he was like here or so that opening the door of the car, and somebody just going up the ramp, and somebody just passing by, and then family of some sort here. So I've put together two people together just to kind of make sense. Oh, they're just coming out of that entrance there. They're just having a bit of a talk and that sort of thing. So, having a bit of setting out the scene doesn't hurt at all. So that's what I would like to do as far as placement of people. And then something that you might have noticed is that in my dialog over here, I can go down to styles, and then once I hit edit, let me collapse this so you guys could see better. Here, what I like to do is turn off the profiles. Often profiles themselves could increase the amount of calculation that your computers have to do. So I usually turn them off altogether. If any, you want to put it as 1 so that you can see the outline of the sort of trees or blobs that you have. Sometimes people do prefer having that, but your machine could come to a halt if you have that turned on in a lot of cases, especially if you're working with a model with a lot of edges. So in that case, or even in this purpose, I want to turn them off. And that's usually how I have set up my styles as. And here I can also go ahead and click on the second cube over here, which sets out the face settings of the styles. And here I've actually gone ahead and changed my back color as something bright. And the reason for that it is because you want to be able to find the back face of your model quite easily. They don't behave so well, especially for renderings either. So it's a good practice to make sure that your models are not reverse faced. So my favorite color just happens to be teal or bluish color. So I just made it bright enough so that I can spot them from miles away. For example, like this one is where the solid and the modeling wasn't all complete. And I'll get to that in a bit, but you can spot them immediately because of this bright color. So that's what you would like to do. And once you have your favorite style that's ready, I advise that you go to File and then you save as a template. And once you have that as a template, then once you start a new model, that template will show up. However, since I've got a lot of assets over here, if I save this as a template, then all of these are going to show up every single time you start a new model. So I'll save myself from doing that. However, you do want to get in habit of using a consistent style. And another thing for you to save as a template or inside the template is the layering system as well. So perhaps you need to say as a tags, not layers. Sorry. So tags system is something that you can kind of put together that makes sense to you and your type of projects or tasks that you're doing. And in this case, I like to use the numbering slash naming scheme, all the basic information such as terrain or topography or Google Earth or Google Photo type of thing. I would like to name them and then have it as 00 so that it just shows up on the top of the list and then goes down to further things that I'll be putting on more secondary element structure, walls and such, and doors and roof and windows would be number 2 category. Obviously, then the numbers could differ a little bit, and your list could be a lot longer or shorter. But in my case, I found this to be somewhat useful, so I kind of stuck with similar type of organization, and obviously varying between projects as well. So I may do things slightly differently, but this is sort of an example of tags system that I've got going. And I'll come back to that in a bit. But something that I also want to mention is usage of shortcuts. One of the custom shortcut that I will be using in the background, if I search hide, and I have Shift H as a hide and unhide all for Shift U. So the keys that I'll be pressing is if I want to look inside of this model here, I can't really see inside. And if I do, sorry, if I go to preferences and then hide, there is a model hide, but also view components hide rest of the model, and I have H as hiding rest of the model. And that is essentially if you go to view and then component edit and hide rest of the model. And what that really does is once I click that or hit the short key, then you just hide rest of the model and just highlight or isolate view of whatever the component or group that you are currently working on. And that becomes really handy because you can go back and forth quite easily, either reference something versus just look inside so that I can easily edit something. So that becomes really easy tool to use, and it's gonna come by very handy. So that is something that I'll be using. And again, for hide and unhide is basically I highlight something like a roof here. I have it as a separate thing instead of moving it, because if I move it, then it is going to, and my machine is thinking, okay, it is basically going to physically move them, and I actually don't want to do that. So I go ahead and Shift H, which is hide, and if I want to bring back the roof after working inside of it, then I'll be pressing Shift U, which is unhide all, therefore bringing back the roof. So I can lift all the roof so that I can work inside, and Shift U to bring back everything. And that became sort of a fluid workflow that I have, so you can certainly use that. And as far as the layer slash tagging goes, there is an extension from Sketchucation Store. If you just go ahead and search, layer name. And if you go to layer name, you can see a couple of extensions showing up. And the reason for this is because tags used to be called layers, and I guess the extension names didn't really follow the updates to the SketchUp. And here is the, sorry, one from Tigs, and layer name, export, and import is the one that we are looking for. And it is made by a person who goes by name of Tig. He is someone who makes a lot of extensions that I use. So you can go ahead and install and download. And once you do that, you may get a little prompt like this, and then you can just choose the first one, and then choose the auto install folder, and then just say yes, okay. And once you have that, then you are going to have basically, I believe that you can find it usually at the bottom if it's a fresh install of the extension. However, in my case, it's going to show up right up here in the middle because I had it installed before. Extensions, layer X or M, I guess export and import. And then I can export all the layers that I have so that I can bring it back later. Or I can go to import so that I can bring in all the extensions, or sorry, the layers that I've got. So I've saved it here. I can just click on it and open. So open. So it's going to import all of these layers. Even if I had it deleted. Okay, if I had it deleted, extension, import, you see how it all came back? So that's something that you might want to keep in mind, so that on your template, even if you kind of deviated from the layer list, you can import something again, or maybe you have accidentally deleted something and then you want to get it back, you can certainly do it that way. All right. Any questions so far? And something that I do want to cover is copy and paste in place. It becomes quite important because paste in place is something that actually is a default in a lot of Adobe softwares as well. So I don't know why, but SketchUp does not have a default shortcut for paste in place. And I'll explain why this is so useful. But you can assign a shortcut of Control-Shift-V instead of Control-V of paste. You want to utilize Control-V as well. So my shortcut for it, obviously the default is cut is Control-X, Control-C for copy. Paste is always Control-V for universally. And then paste in place as a Control-Shift-V. And what we do here is, once I hide this and go in here, perhaps you can see that these lights don't really belong into the floor group, or this group where it contains all the furniture. So I want to bring all of these pendant lights into that group, let's say, and I think it's a good practice to do so. And previously you can perhaps do copy or and then go into the group and then paste and somehow land or reference something to place them. It's going to be really hard. Whereas if I were to go ahead and paste in place, or Control-Shift-V for short, then it's going to show up exactly on that spot. So you can easily do that. However, now I have a duplicate because I have those pendants outside as well. So let's just go ahead and combine a couple of shortcuts that we picked up. So let's go ahead and out here, I can select all of these and then cut, Control-X. And then if I go double click into the group that I want to paste it into, and then Control-Shift-V, then that will basically place them in there, and it is not going to exist outside of that group. So that is a good practice or perhaps a good method to move certain elements inside and out of a component. So I've done that right there to bring those things in there, and I can certainly do these lights or these furnitures into a group as well. Or if you really want, you can go ahead and cut something out and paste it out just to take them out of the group that it belongs in. So those are a good practice to get into. Again, you saw the usage of hide and unhide as well. And as you might have seen, I kind of go back and forth between these saved scene as well. Give them a good, meaningful name rather than scene 1, 2, 3, because when you're doing, I don't know, streaming session or presentation, it's going to be very hard to remember what scene 3 or scene 4 was supposed to be. So it's good to just click on them and then be able to snap back onto those specific spots that you intend to have any conversations of. And as a general practice, I always have a first scene that is named as model. And that is to go back to my modeling scene. So it's just back out and unhide everything so that I can easily snap back to a spot that I can start modeling with. Or like an aerial view is okay too. But I also turned off the scene transition. Sometimes scene transition is nice to have, but it takes some time and actually it may stutter your machine. And often having a bit of animation going through floors and walls is not as nice, especially when you are working with very complex model. So in my template, I actually have them turned off. And in order to do that, you go to model info under the window. And then when you go to animation, you can enable scenes transition or you can just turn them off altogether. And there was one time where there was like a bug inside of SketchUp where the time of the day will not change on certain rendering machines. So the only way to address that was actually to have it checked, but have it as a 0 second. So it just goes to the next scene, but the time of the day is respected by other external rendering engines. So I have it as this, and it makes no difference between either having turned off or turned on. However, if it has any seconds inputted there as a default, I think it's 3 seconds. And once you do that, you see those animations between scenes. And I think in this case, it kind of works well because you're just kind of swooping down into the scene and even the gallery. But again, the approach shouldn't be through the glass. Obviously, it doesn't have intelligence to find the right path when you are kind of going around your building. I'd rather go through this door rather than just bashing your head into the glass. So I don't think this sort of transition works so well. And obviously, if you're progressing like these, again, I'm going outside of the model as I just kind of pan into this shot. So it may be able to, I don't know, tell a bit better story about the approach and how you kind of experience the space. But I just don't think it's a very effective way because, again, I just went through a wall again. So personally, I like to just turn it off or at least have it as 0 seconds so that no other software just kind of bugs out. So there, it's just snappier, and you can always talk about where they are. And obviously, if I'm just kind of going into the room, I want to do it kind of like this so that people know which way I'm going through to find that space. But sometimes it's beneficial to have a specific shot so that I can go back to those scenes quite easily. So if I want to have that perfect angle, I can just click on this one so that I can just snap there. And you might have seen me using a couple of other navigation methods. First of all, the orbit. I'm going to use a scroll wheel to zoom in and out. Obviously, you're going to find yourself doing that immediately, even as a beginner. But you can also click on the middle mouse button or the wheel to orbit around. And that's a recommended way of navigating through your model. And then whilst orbiting, if you hold down shift key, then you're going to start panning around. And all of that three sort of navigation system, either zoom, orbit, and panning should be all of your muscle memory so that you can easily navigate through the model. And extra points for anyone who's wanting to navigate even better is by, if you want to look up and to the kitchen right now, a lot of people will try to do pan and then orbit, pan and orbit to just kind of look up in the area. But again, that's not necessarily a natural movement. You want to just kind of look up as you navigate through your model, especially during the presentation too. Doing these sort of movement to look elsewhere is a little bit jarring for especially people who's not used to the modeling environment. So what I like to do is in when you are progressing into the model, and if I want to just kind of swoop up and then look up into the entrance, then what I do is hit Shift C, which is the camera, and then the walk mode. And it's not necessarily a walk mode per se. This is actually a walk tool. And once you are in a walk tool instead of like a selection tool, walk tool, then the footsteps kind of appear in the middle of your scene. And then at this point, if you hold down the scroll wheel just like how you would orbit, you actually look around. So instead of moving, you're going to look in certain directions. So combined with just a regular selection tool that you can just orbit and pan, but if you want to look in certain direction, just hit Shift C to basically change the camera. And then I can use the scroll wheel middle mouse button to look up in certain direction, and I can just scroll in again basically to zoom. And if you want really smooth transition, then I can look up somewhere and then hold down your mouse button, the left mouse button, and then push it up a little bit so that you just have this sort of the slow animation within your scene. So those are the aspects that you can utilize, especially when you're doing presentation. Perhaps I don't really need to do this when I'm modeling. I want to be a bit quicker than this. So I may just use zooming if I'm trying to get to somewhere, perhaps looking underside of this lamp. But it makes the overall navigation quite easy this way so that you can just look to a certain side and then hit spacebar to go back to selection tool. And then you can certainly do that over and over to navigate better. Okay, so far I have not really dropped any extensions that I would like to use, and I expect this sort of series to be a bit more expanded. So today is sort of the first episode, but on the following weeks I want to cover more things so that you guys learn more. So just bear with me. The next one that I want to mention is Purge All, and this is something that I've been using, I guess, more than 15 years that I have used SketchUp for, and it's located extension in Purge, and this is an extension obviously that you have to download. And if you go to Sketch Education, if you search Purge, then the Purge All from Tigs will show up right there, and then you can just download it. And once you download it, and I can also assign a shortcut for that extension, and I have done that there. So either you click on this or Shift 0. That is actually, I'm trying to zero out everything, and here I get to purge everything. Either you, as a default, you have everything as yes, and once you do that, then it is going to purge all the things that are inside of your model. And if you have never run this tool in the past, you'll notice that your model size will improve significantly, and all the components that you have used on the model but actually not placed it inside are still saved, and it is going to eat up the storage of your device. So it is good practice to run this so that you just sort of clean out and get rid of the things that you're not using. And so that's something that is going to be constantly useful, and I have just habit of hitting Shift 0 every now and then to run this tool, and then I can hit OK to basically accept all of those things. And for whatever reason, if you want to keep a certain type of tagging system that you already have, so this is a dummy empty layer. And if I want to keep that empty layer for whatever reason in the future, then I can hit Shift to 0. And if I hit OK on this one, that was going to go away because it's empty. However, if I wish not to do that, then I can hit Shift 0. And then here in the purge layers, I can say no. Then it's going to just omit that part so that it doesn't get purged. And next time I run it, it's going to be staying the same so that I don't need to worry about accidentally purging out the aspect of the model that I want to keep. However, in this case, I don't want to keep that layer, so I'm going to go ahead and hit yes, okay, and then it is going to get rid of that quite easily. And a lot of time I just Shift 0, enter, and then enter, and I don't have to just click on something else. So it's quite easy that way. And the next one I want to mention is the TomTom's selection tools. And this one is available through the extension warehouse. So here you go, selection toy. And this is something that's made by TomTom. You'll see his face on a lot of tools as well. And you get to install this. And once you install it, obviously you'll be bombarded by a lot of icons that may be available for you. But I don't really put up specific icons in here. Actually, I just use the context menu, which means right-click menu. So in this case, when I was trying to select all of these lights, I was actually individually clicking like this when they were outside. So let's just cut them out. I'm going to place it outside so that I can easily select them again, just to kind of show you that practice. I was actually holding down Shift key so that I can add those things into my selection. But instead, I can actually go ahead and right click this one. And then there's going to be these bottom 4 context menu that appears due to the selection toy that I just installed. And then go to instances, select active. And once I do that, it selects all of these things that are active in your scene. And I can just cut that, go into this group, paste in place, and then I can come out from it. And basically I've effectively moved those lights into that group. And you see how quick that was. And actually, if I want to go back in and actually get rid of them for whatever reason, then I can actually go ahead and instances, select active, and it is going to select all of those. For example, I have all of these tiny little plants, but I've got it repeated several times. And I can either individually select these, and obviously you've got your method of being able to window select as well. But I can right click, instances, select active, and then it is going to select everything. However, it is actually instances active. That means that it is only going to select the ones of that kind within the group or component that you're currently looking inside. So meaning if I were to do instances and select all, then you'll see that it is actually selecting the other ones that are outside of this group as well. And you can actually use this to your advantage. Some of the things that I could think of is possibly copying this. And then if I come out of it, and even if I have deleted these aspects, I can do copy in place. And actually that did not bring it into that there. Okay, never mind. But you are able to select outside of the active group that way. But my most of use case scenario is actually instances and select active. So that's very, very useful, basically selecting all the same type of component that you have used so far. So for example, at these light posts, I want to select all of them. So I go here and then I have selected all of those, and I can make it into a group so that later I can come back to it and then just go into the group to have them all collected into a little bit of enclosure, if you will. And next one, oh, actually, and in regards to selection toy, there are other aspects that it's going to play a role. Another one is when you're looking at a bit more complex geometry like this, there's a lot of thin elements and it's kind of hard to get into little bitty faces and edges that are here. So some of the aspect that you can do is you have certain things selected, and here you can just say something like select only the edges. Then it is going to deselect all other aspects other than the edges, or I can select all, which is Control A by default, and then right click, and then I can just say select only, I don't know, curves, arcs, circles, or polygons, or faces. So I want to deselect all the edges, then I can do that as well. So that becomes really easy model manipulating tool, or perhaps something that's going to help you manipulate your model. And the next one is extensions, extension warehouse, and then you can search for something called push line. And it's a Adebio push line. I do not know how to say that, but in there you can download and install this one. And I actually have that button available here, just kind of wanted to show you visually, but I don't really need that because I already have a shortcut of Shift P. And then, actually, sorry, Shift O, not P. So if I do a Shift O, so for example here, I've got this slope and I would like to stick in a slope that is just in that incline so that this car could rest on. However, if I take a rectangle tool and try to do that, you'll see that my rectangle doesn't really form that way. There is a way to just kind of do that, but it is a little troublesome. I think the easier way is to just basically push pull this line up to there so that it just forms a face. And I found that to be a bit more intuitive. So I hit Shift O. And once I do that, I can just click here and click right there. And then it just forms the surface for me. And again, you'll still see this blue surface, which is the back face of the model. And I can just correctly enclose that by taking a line tool and basically drawing a surface. And in this case, I want this sort of asphalt on it. So I just applied it there. And now that car could rest on top of here. And also I want to fill in this bit where the pavement goes up following the ramp as well. So I can just go here, double click. Again, I am using that hide rest of the model shortcut as well. And then use a line tool, take this one here, and then click on there. And then also click on here, click on there. And because this is kind of sloped in multiple ways, it is actually not going to be able to form a surface if you do a rectangle. So that surface needs to exist. Actually, I guess I could delete that. And then also if I do triangulation here, there's nothing over here, as you can see. So I just have to draw that and then delete this one. So now that I have a slope that goes up along with the ramp that I have drawn. Actually, there is a little bit of slope, as you can see. So that's a bit that I can do. Perhaps I can even this out if I want to make it flat, but I think that's all right. So that's what you can do. And then something that I want to do is basically dropping this car onto this surface. So I can go to extension and ray tracer, and that's ray tracer is also available in the warehouse by TomTom as well. So this one here. And once you have that use, something that you can do, so for example, like this planter over here, if I want to drop it onto the slope that it's got, I can go to ray tracer and drop component, and it is going to basically drop to the origin point where that red and green and blue line generates from. That's going to just touch the surface that is underneath that component or the group. So I'm going to put that back up. However, in this case, if I were to do that, ray tracer, drop components, then this wheel is not necessarily going to rest well. And also the front wheels are going to float. And in this case, you want to drop it on the slope. not necessarily to a single point. You want to slope the car or incline the car, if you will. So I just undo that and then go to extension, ray tracer, drop component by bounds, which bound means that blue box that actually shows around the component that you have. And once you do that, then it is going to drop on the slope. So that becomes quite easy to drop trees and cars or people and such. If you have a car that is just having to be floating, then you can just go to extension, ray tracer by bounds, and then it's going to drop onto the surface. So you can fix those very easily, even if these people are all over the slope of, I don't know, sort of a dune that is that you have drawn. Then you can drop all of them to the surface. In this case, I've got all sorts of trees, so if I were to drop them, they're just going to drop onto the trees. But let's attempt it. You see how some of them fell onto the ground, whereas some of them are just hanging out on top of the tree. So you can do that, but again, it's an easy way of placing people over a slope or surface that is curved. Okay. And something over here. So because this sort of presentation was formed for Enscape, I wanted to just kind of show you what kind of Enscape assets that I was using. So with a similar vein, all of these trees are actually Enscape assets. So what I tend to do is when you place these assets, you do it by going to Asset Library of Enscape. And then under there, you can easily find the vegetation. And vegetation will have a lot of things in there. And I can pick something like for this tree here. And once I click that, I can just place that into the scene. And then obviously I can put a lot more than that. And once I bring that in, I usually go to the entity info and actually have that changed to a tag that it belongs. So I want to tag that as a trees so that next time I go open the tags and then just click on trees, all the trees become hidden. So that's a pretty good practice. Once you put in something either from 3D Warehouse or Asset Library, you want to have them belong to the correct tagging. So once you do that, another aspect that I do is I make a new material. So here, relatively kind of bark-like color, and I'll just name it tree bark. Okay, and then with that, I go in here, double click it to add it inside of this component, and then I will just add that color onto the bark. And I do that because having a completely white tree in the scene could be kind of jarring, especially when you're looking at things in your SketchUp, not in the rendering. In the rendering, it will look nice, but when you're especially modeling, and sometimes you want to just present out of SketchUp because SketchUp is good enough to showcase a lot of geometry in the space that you have designed. So it's useful to have that. So I just assign color to the stem. And then if you were to add a color or material on top of, let's say, not inside the component, then it is going to change whatever the default material. So this white right now that is showing is a default color. And because of that, if I were to come up with, I don't know, tree color 01, and then okay this, and then this red color is going to show up on this tree whilst maintaining the bark color because that was actually assigned inside of a component. So this way you can have a bit more randomized tree color. So I can sample this tree color and then apply it here. And if I were to have all same green color, it's going to be a little bit weird. So you might want to have perhaps not the blue type, but you can have slightly different colors between them. So even though it's actually same tree, you can have a bit of a variation between them like that. And again, instead of clicking all of them, I can go ahead and right click instances, select active, so that all the same trees are going to get selected. And then I can just apply that color. Obviously, they're all going to be the same. So in this case, I want to just go ahead and randomize a little bit so that I have different color trees in the scene as well. So that's basically how this clump of tree was generated. So that's what I do in terms of plants and trees, just so that they have a bit of variation between them. I may even do that kind of color in here. It actually doesn't change the color of the rendering, but I think it looks a bit more natural, or looks a bit less jarring, if you will, because once you have same exact trees and the same exact orientation, it's going to be very obvious and it's not going to look as nice. And here, another one that I want to mention is component replacer. So what component replacer does is, in conjunction with selecting all the same components within your scene, here, these are all the trees that are exactly the same component. But let's say I want to replace with this new tree that I have put in, or perhaps even small ones like these. Instead of a big one, I want to replace all of them. So if I go to instances, select active, actually I have to have that extension installed. So you can just go ahead and search component replacer. And again, it's made by TomTom. And you can install that. And once you install that, I can go ahead and find that right here. Perhaps it's over here. Yeah. Under tools, you're going to find component replacer, and I have that as a shift V. I try to assign shift whenever I'm using a extension, and component replacer. And then if I were to click on this tree over here, it is going to replace it, but in the same scale. And a lot of times that could work, especially for like a tree. It makes sense because it just blows up in the scale and respect whatever the bounding box you currently had or previously had. However, in this case, I'd rather do, if you look down here at the bottom, it says press Control to disable scale to fit. If I hold down Control key and then hit this tree, then it is going to come in at the scale of 1 without being all blown up to the size or shrunken to the existing bounding box size. So it may be more useful to do either of the situation, especially when you're trying to, let's say, put in a different size chair, then you want to enable the control so that it doesn't the new chair that you use become too small or too big. In this case, I want to just snap back where it used to be. Perhaps this new tree that I put down is what I want to use. Then again, I go to instances and then shift V, and then I hold down control so that new tree comes in as a scale of 1, and then it replaces all of them. So I can delete this one, and now that tree has been applied to everywhere. And all the orientation is going to be respected as well. So if you had any rotation, that's going to be done on them as well. And one of the other one that I would like to show is if you go to Sketch Occasion and search for random, there's going to be random select by TIG, and you can download that. And once you download that and install, there's going to be random select available for you under extension. And here, random select, I can type in 50%, and 50% of my current selection is now selected. So this way you can randomize a lot of things. For example, if I had all of these trees as these dark green color, but if I want to, and especially when you have like hundreds or even thousands of components within your scene, then you can random select those things. So instances, and then go to here, and then random select 50% once you do that. And then I can apply the lighter color so that they're randomized. It doesn't look as randomized, so I'll make that and then this one. So you may do some adjustments later, but the principle is you can do random selection, and that adds a bit of automation selecting the randomized elements within your model. Speaking of randomizing, there's a random scale and rotate tool as well. So some of these trees are not rotated; they're just kind of looking exactly the same. So in order to adjust that, I can go to instances, select all of active, and actually download. You can download this before you select all of those, but you can search scale and rotate. And Chris Fulmer has made this tool. So CLF, scale and rotate multiple. And once you download it and install, under the extensions, there's going to be Chris Fulmer tools. And then you can find scale and rotate randomly. And once you do that, this dialog is going to pop up. And then that is going to show you minimum scale factor 0, 0.5, 1.5. Don't be frightened by all of these numbers, but basically it means what's the minimum scale of all of these things. I'm going to say 0.9 and then 1.1 so that there's not as much variation between them. And then I can type in 360 here as an example, and then OK that, and they're going to slightly rotate and scale slightly differently. Obviously, if you want a bit more variation between them, you can increase the number that you use, so perhaps 0.5 and 1.5, and then rotate to 360 as a max. Then it is going to have a bit more variation between the big one and the small one. So that is going to add a lot of variation within your scene, and plants and the trees will appreciate within your scene. Okay, we're kind of close to the top of the hour. If you guys have any questions, I'll be able to answer any other question. Otherwise, I'll just keep going to mention a few more extensions. When it comes to kind of cleaning up in addition to the purge tool, shift to 0, again, you use that to purge it. But you can use something like cleanup from TomTom and also the edge tools from TomTom. And you can find both of them by going to Extension Warehouse, Edge Tools, this one right here with a icon of a cookie, and then cleanup. And then cleanup and edge tools, I guess they both exist when you look up cleanup. And once you do that, if I were to go in here, I believe I left some edges here. So you see how all of these edges kind of exist, but they just kind of exist in a random fashion. And these could be certainly cleaned up by using eraser tool like this. But instead of doing that, I can automate this. So select all, and then I can go to tools, and then not edge tools, sorry, extensions, and then cleanup, and then I can run merge faces. And as a shortcut, I've got Shift W. And if you look up your keyboard, W is next to E, and then E is next to R. And there's a reason why I've assigned it this way. Shift W. So if I were to select everything, Control A, and then Shift W, once I do that, it starts to get rid of the edges in between. So anything that's coplanar and have the same material, it's going to merge together, merge faces. So that gets rid of those edges. Some of the edges, so basically it got rid of this edge that was bounding this box, but then some of the remainder edges may still remain. And if that's the case, you can go to Tools and then Edge Tools. And then there's going to be next one, which is E, that is next to the W key, and then run Shift E. If you hit Shift E, then it is going to clean up all the edges just hanging about, not doing anything. So that's a really easy way to kind of clean up your models. Again, select all, Shift W, Shift E, And then I've just cleaned up all of my surfaces quite easily. So if you got a lot of edges and things that are not actually doing anything within your scene, you can certainly use that to basically clean up your model quite easily. And there's a bonus point for using Shift R, which is currently assigned to Freddo's tool. And I actually don't know exactly how to find it. So Freddo's tools, it's gonna be, yep, here. So under the tools drop down menu, there's gonna be Freddo tools, and here I've got Shift R, which is one after E. So WER, Shift R, remove lonely vertices. And once you do that, there's gonna be a couple of points within my model that actually are edges that are not a continuous line. For example, if I had this line, just to kind of visually demonstrate, I can turn on the endpoints within my model. Sorry, endpoints. Once I turn that on, you'll see that there are like a little blip that shows up on your edges. And then in order to get rid of any of cutoff points like this where it's segmented, the only way to actually get rid of this is by drawing an edge or line from it, like so, and then actually using the eraser tool to do that. Then you can get rid of that segment. And it's, I guess, labor intensive, especially if you're trying to do that for hundreds or potentially thousands of edges that has been segmented. So in order to line that up easier, what you can do is basically what I was doing, Control A to select everything, Shift W to clean up all the faces, Shift E to get rid of any edges or lines that exist doing nothing, and then Shift R again to get rid of any segment that exists within your scene. So in here, you can see just over there, there are two blips and there's a segment of an edge there. And whilst this tool is running, it actually highlights that for you so that you can see it. There's 4 lonely vertices, or the segmentation that's happening, and you can hit OK, and it basically gets rid of all of that. So that just cleans up your model quite easily, and that's what I usually do in order to clean up a model. Especially useful for something that you get off of 3D Warehouse, so that you can just download it and then just run that tool to make sure there's no wasted edges or surfaces or vertices that are in your scene. I do see some more viewers watching now, so if you guys have any questions, please leave it in the chat. I'll be delighted to have a conversation with you. Just let me know where you're joining from. Okay, so the next one that I want to cover is this may be not necessarily something that you can find easily. Let me see. Let me attempt. So if you search lines to tubes, so this tool is actually converted or based on Tig's tool, and Didier Burr has developed this tool, and you can download it. And once you download it, what happens is that a lot of times when you make a building or some sort of surface inside of SketchUp, a lot of people do this by, okay, we've got this building, and then now I want to convert that into some sort of curtain wall, so that they just go ahead and assign some sort of bluish color and then make it transparent and then call it, they probably don't even name this, but curtain wall 1. And you do just apply this, and because I want this to have some mullion system, you can use the array function and divide that by, I don't know, 10. And also something like this. Divide that by 5 maybe. So you have this sort of curtain wall generated. And one of the trouble is a lot of rendering software that you use will not respect these lines that shows up in your scene. and just treat the entire thing as a one surface. And also, you might want to make it into something that is more substantial so that your curtain wall is not literally just a surface. So, if that's the case, first, I would not really have a geometry that are floating like that. So, I would at least make this into a one single group and everything else as something else so that I can just play with this surface quite easily. And let me cut that out, paste it out here so that I can freely just kind of change that. And in here, I can select everything and then go to extensions. And then there's extrude lines vector by 2 points. That's actually what gets shown up if you use that lines to tube, install that lines to tube extension. Once you do that, a dialog should pop up, but it is not on my system for whatever reason. Oh, it may have shown up somewhere, but I don't see it. What's going on? Maybe it doesn't work anymore? Oh, it's a different tool. I'm so sorry. That is not this tool. Sorry, my apologies. That should really make convert arcs and circles, curves, this one here. So once you do that, if you manage to find where the tool exists, not like me, then this dialog would show up. Follow on curves, yes. Create group, yes. Create tube each group, no. I actually don't want that. And the material as just nothing, so that it's a default material or whatever the material that you happen to apply to the group or component. And the diameter, I want it to be 4 inches. Precision as 10 is not really good because it's gonna strike a circle thing. So I actually want that to be somewhat, at least in a sort of diamond or more blocky shape, so that you kind of read it as not circular thing. So I actually put down 4. It means 4 sides. In this case, if I do that, it's going to make these mullions created. So 4-inch diameter mullion that gets created out here. So I can actually cut that, come out and use that trick, paste in place, and then you've got yourself with all the edges turned into little tubes, basically. And that basically strikes you with the mullions that gets generated. Obviously, and especially if you have something that is very complex, such as using like a soap bubble or lofting so that you have a curved surface and you like to just strike a mullion on top, then that is a good way to generate it, even on surfaces that are not flat. So that was a little preview of what that can be used for. And the next tool that I want to showcase is a mirror tool. So mirror tool is actually right here. I don't need to because I do have a shortcut again, but if you go to Sketchucation store this time and search for mirror, and TIG made another tool called mirror, and you can download that. And I actually have a shortcut of Shift M for this. So for example, if I want to have a car, or maybe, let's see, inside of this building over here, I've got these sconces on the side of this wall here. And let's say I want to have them mirror onto this side. And SketchUp does have, used to have flip along, but now they have a different tool for this, which is the mirror tool or flip tool, if you will. And then you can just click on that, and then you can click on red, and then it will just flip. But it doesn't create a copy. If you want to create a copy, then you can hit Control, and then if I were to hit Control, then I can just do a copy. So it creates a copy, but the trouble is that once I have made that, I have to drag that, move it along the red axis, use it on that surface so it sticks onto that surface, and I happen to grab the wrong one. So let me go back and try to grab the correct one. Okay, I did grab it. So use this, just have it along the red axis, lock it with the shift key, and then reference the surface so that I have kind of glued it onto this wall. there was a lot of steps. So if we were to go back and then just here, if I select these two, or perhaps select right click and then select active, then I've selected the two. And then if I run a mirror tool, that little icon, or if you click on here, I think it may show up. I actually never used drop down menu for this, so I'm not sure where it shows up. Let's see, mirror, 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 mirror. Do you guys see anything? Draw? Nope. Tools. Mirror, 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 mirror. Sorry, I just used shortcut Shift M, so I'm having trouble finding it. Okay, I give up. I will just use a shortcut. So, oh, maybe right click? Here. Mirror selection. Good. So it shows up on your context menu. And then I can just highlight somewhere midpoint here, midpoint in the group. Click here. Just move along the green axis, click once more, and then move along blue axis. So you're just drawing that plane that you want to mirror of, and then click again, and then it asks you, do you want to erase the original selection? And I say no, so that I can keep that there. And now I have mirrored it. So in sort of hindsight, to do it quickly, I can just do this, and then without explaining what I'm doing, I basically do the same thing that I just did. So that was a lot simpler to flip and move it against another wall. So this mirror tool not only flips the things, but also mirrors it so that you have a mirrored component or group that exists on the other side rather than just on that same place that it was initially placed in. So that becomes quite useful, especially when you're doing a lot of mirroring and copying and pasting. All right, I'm on actually the 29th page of the document, so I think I covered quite a bit here. Unless you guys have any questions, I'm gonna wrap up things here so that we can continue this in perhaps next week. How about that? All right, so I'll perhaps continue that. If you are watching this on the recording, then please do leave a comment down below. Some of the things that you would like to know or something that you want me to expand further, I'll be happy to do that. I want to make this into sort of a series where you can pick up a lot of tips and tricks and learn about different things. Not perhaps just SketchUp, but perhaps some renderings, as well as different type of software, architectural software as well. So hopefully we can have some guests, or I do a bit more teaching in that regard. If you have any specific topic that you would like to suggest, please leave them down in the comment. I'll be happy to look at those topic and see how I can make something for you guys. So I think that is pretty much it for today. Thanks for everyone joining in and watching, as well as watching this stream on the recording. I'll see you sometime next week. I'm thinking Monday, but if you would like to suggest different time, please do so. Let me roll the outro, and I will see you next time. Oh, thank you for the chat. Thank you.